You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Overhead Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by
Tracy McMillan with Nelson Nygaard.
Hey, Tracy, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Jeff. How are you? Great to see you again.
I know, great to see you too. I'm glad you're back. Folks are always clamoring for you to come back on the show, so I appreciate that.
I'm sure I come up in the comments.
No. I think people love guests. They love when people come on and share opinions and thoughts and real world stuff. So I appreciate you coming on. And you know, I'm sitting in this cave here in my basement and talking about stuff all day, and you're out there in the real world doing stuff. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. And sorry for those that like the Han Solo episodes. But, yeah.
Oh, this is in some ways this is easier for me, so I appreciate it too. Yeah. So what have you been up to since we last chatted?
I just got back from Austin. I was there last week for the Texas Pedestrian Safety Forum, which was a great one-day event. That was great to hear about, cool projects that are going on. There was this really great panel on work that's being done. I should look at my notes so I don't forget any of this, but you all know the Texas State Crash Database misses a lot of data. It's if vehicular crashes are captured in that database, and if there's a police report that's filed, but it, like a lot of our state level crash databases, do not capture pedestrian and bicycle crashes well. And so there's been work done in Texas to look at EMS and trauma data and to capture it, like was done early on by San Francisco Department of Public Health and Megan Weir there and her team when she was there to better capture the EMS and pedestrian and bicycle crash data that is coming in through the EMS and trauma databases, and to have that be accessible at a state level, which I thought was super exciting. Wrote down a bunch of notes on that and who to contact and be able to access some of that data. It can't be disaggregated down too far because of
HIPAA.
Identifiable factors.
Yeah.
But it's just, I love data, and being able to take some data and triangulate it from different sources to be able to tell a more comprehensive story. Also, in those data sets, we get hopefully get a little bit more information on involved parties and involved vehicle types, and like whether it's a scooter or a analog bike, an e-bike. Hopefully they're also adding things like e-motos, because there's so much e-bike is being used to capture too many things right now, and we need some differentiation
for overregulation, because there's the New Jersey law and there's a bunch of other stuff that's out there that's like just taking what people think they know about like the e-motorcycle and extracting it and projecting it to the other modes, which doesn't make much sense. That's interesting about those crash data, because I'm always interested too in like not just like the crashes that happened, but also like the ones that didn't, and the near misses and things like that. Yes. It would be really cool, like if there could be like some way to extrapolate as well for figuring out those, because that's kind of how you can figure out in some ways like what streets are and intersections and roads and stuff are really dangerous. Even if nothing happened.
You know about UC Berkeley SafeTrec's Street Story tool. So that's a great resource to be used for crowdsourcing that information through community engagement activities. And I think it's each of these our stories and our understanding of a situation is always stronger when we can look at multiple data sources and layer them together to look at how they're working together and how they're filling gaps in each data set on its own.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I mean, I know that you and I have talked before in the past in terms of just because a person's walking there doesn't mean, there's probably a good reason why people aren't walking in a location based on the conditions that exist there. It's not necessarily for lack of people interested in walking there. Something like near miss data is really important for that. Or just because a crash hasn't happened doesn't mean it doesn't have the potential for a crash to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So I think for future, overhead wire episodes, it would be great to have maybe those speakers on from that panel.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah. And then you're still in your process of moving to Austin at some point soon. So that's exciting.
That'll happen sometime in July.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm just excited to have more folks in Austin to visit when I'm there.
That's right. Like we said, it's changed so much, but I'm looking forward to getting back there and getting reconnected with everybody, and then seeing you there this fall.
That's right. We'll be there this fall. I'm excited about that too. I'm too excited about it. I think I'm too excited. I don't know if I've never had this feeling where I was too excited, but I think maybe I'm too excited. I keep on writing stuff down. I'm like the mad, that the picture of I can't remember the character's name from It's Always Sunny, but he's sitting there with like the conspiracy theory board and all the lines are coming together. I feel like that right now. It's Charlie, I think maybe.
Hopefully that's not the direction of your.
I don't think I'm. No, I'm not gonna go. I don't think I'll get there, but like I feel like that right now. I'll get out of it. I'll climb out of it for sure.
Value capture conspiracy theory.
This is a conspiracy. Thanks again to everybody who's ordered bus and bike scarves. If you'd like to order one, just head on over to theoverheadwire.com and email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Also, I've been loving the pictures folks have been sending in with them wearing their scarves at events and rallies on the front steps of city halls and places of legislature, and that's awesome as well. I'm trying to work on a new design. Tracy also made a request for gaiters last time. I did look up what we could do. There's a couple of companies. Most of the companies actually only let you put like a logo on and not like a design on the whole thing. So
does it compromise the cooling aspect of a cooling towel?
Well, I don't know, because if it's a print, but if it's inside of, like, if the ink is like inside, I don't think it should be too much of a problem. But if it's like one of those things where they put the plastic over the top, the plastic like cover, like a t-shirt, like sometimes they put the plastic over the top of the thread and it's not as good. But I think some of them are like in the weaving process or something like that. So I have been looking at this. There's a company called Naughty Tie that does some full designs. Will let you do a full design on the gaiter. So I'm thinking about it, and I've working on it and trying to figure it out.
All right.
So I'm getting there.
All right.
And as we always note, we really thank everybody for supporting the show, whether that's on Patreon or buying books off the Bookshop site, patreon.com/theoverheadwire, bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. If you go to the Bookshop site, you can purchase any book that you would like, not just the ones of the folks we've interviewed. We actually are almost at 100 books on our Bookshop site for the interviews. So we've almost done.
Wow.
I think we have, because there's some books that aren't on Bookshop, but I think we've done over 100 interviews with authors talking about books.
That's amazing.
So lots of really cool stuff in there. Or get your Cars or Cholesterol t-shirts and merch through TeePublic, bit.ly/Cars or Cholesterol. You can find the drawer of those items, Richard Wazensky, on Instagram at Dick David Sketches. He did a great job drawing that telltale heart of urban dysfunction. And also, we strongly suggest folks sign up for the newsletter. We've got a YouTube explainer up discussing what you can do with the newsletter in the archives, everything along those lines. And again, I appreciate the support on Patreon. $2 a month gets you some stickers and a handwritten note. $10 a month will get you one of our scarves. And then $1 a month will get you this podcast advertising free. So no car ads, no political ads, no Amazon, Coca-Cola, whatever it is, no ads except for the ads that I'm doing right now. These are still in there. But it's like 25 cents an episode, even less if you count that we do a couple of Monday shows a month. So for just $1, you can do that. This is episode 199. What 199? 191. We're live and in session. Before we get to the show, I want to let folks know that they can get this podcast and Talking Headways wherever you find your podcasts, including iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, and of course, Apple Podcasts. Please leave a review on iTunes if you are so inclined. Okay, so the news. This is what people are here for, to listen to all of the news about cities and things that come out of the newsletter. These are some of the top stories from the newsletter from the last 2 weeks. Should we start at New Orleans?
Oh, yeah.
Let's start in New Orleans, one of my favorite places. New Orleans should start managed retreat. Sea level rise, the gradual subsidence of coastline, and stronger storms mean that New Orleans and much of the Louisiana coast is likely to be inundated by the end of the century, says a new research paper from Tulane University. Researchers believe that planning for relocation should begin immediately, even if that is politically hard. Over 120 years, by 2050, the state will have lost 5,000 square miles of land to the Gulf of Mexico, a space the size of the state of Connecticut. This was by Oliver Millman in The Guardian. So I think the first time I went to New Orleans was with my parents when I was younger. I grew up in Houston, and so my parents lived there for a little while. My dad worked for an oil company, and before I was born, they lived there. They moved from California to New Orleans, which must have been a little bit of a culture shock for my parents. And so I went back a few times, and I loved the trip every time. But one of the things that was really fascinating is if you drive on I-10, right, to New Orleans, you pass over the Atchafalaya River Basin. And I was told many times by my parents that this is where the Mississippi River actually wants to go, but the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't let it go there. And so it doesn't allow the river to make its own decisions. It goes through New Orleans indefinitely because of the Army Corps. And so it's not allowed to redeposit all the sediments that come from its basin that goes all the way up to Minnesota and around the United States. And so what's interesting about this is that because those sediments aren't there, the land has been receding. The sediments aren't getting replenished. The Gulf of Mexico is inundating. And now with sea level rise, it could just totally take out the southern half of the state. And so that is bad for the state as it is. That's also bad for New Orleans, the city. And so after Katrina, you saw this massive relocation of people, and now they might need to relocate more.
Yeah, it was a very informative article. And you mentioned Katrina. We were both in Austin when that occurred, and didn't witness it firsthand. Did you go and do any of the recovery efforts?
I didn't, because I moved like, so right after that, I moved to California in October. And so that year, but I was, my boss, Shelley, was part of that stuff. The New Urbanism folks went, and did stuff for the coastal recovery and all that. And so I did stuff from afar, but I wasn't necessarily involved. But I do remember a lot of folks coming to Austin, coming to Houston.
Yeah, I mean, think about like forced relocation.
Yeah, and then
because
staying
of that event. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was also thinking about, because they were talking in the article, it talks about not having a recent event, other than, a climate event like that, but something that has been planned for in terms of a relocation of a population, probably since, back in the TVA days, or, when we were building dams and moving towns and moving to communities because areas were going to be flooded to dam up rivers for hydroelectric power. And that was typically on smaller scales. But so yes, certainly it is a significant effort to be thinking about this, but the flip side and the perils of not planning for what is likely inevitable, even though we can't, and this is the challenge, right? We're not good at seeing and planning far into the future and anticipating and acting, being proactive in needs like this, or allowing, natural occurrences, like the idea of allowing the river to return to its natural course and its natural processes. Uh, but then politics get in the way.
I think part of it has to do with also just people's investment in a place. It'd be hard for a whole city to just up and move to another place. And think about not just like the people and the connections, the social connections and stuff that have been there for so long, but like the amount of money that it would take to like, if you tried to like reconstruct New Orleans as a place, and it's not like the biggest city, but it's not tiny either. If you just like decided to move it somewhere else in Louisiana, for example, like just pick it up and move it somewhere else, like you plotted a piece, you got a big piece of land and you plotted it out, like you'd still have to, what's the cost of rebuilding all the buildings and all the infrastructure and all the streetcars and all the, you know, the ship ports and whatever else? I mean, it's a crazy amount of money that would be needed to do that. And so I don't know exactly like how you actually convince people to leave a place that they are so connected to physically and mentally, socially.
Because of the social cost of that.
Right. The social cost of that, especially since, you know, they've already had a social impact from after Katrina. There's a huge amount of that. I mean, it's been documented in you know, on TV and in articles and everything else.
Right.
But it's necessary because in some form or fashion, right? Because it's so hard to think of like not succumbing to this sea level rise at some point in the next, you know, and they're saying like by the end of the century, and that doesn't seem too far away. And, you know, when you think about timelines and the timelines of the earth and everything like that. So they've got to start thinking about something. And otherwise, it's just going to disappear. And I don't know I don't think they can go the Amsterdam route. I don't think they can go the Netherlands route. It's just because, you know, you could put canals in and all that stuff, but I just don't know if you can. We saw what happened during Katrina with the levees and what happened when it failed. And so I just don't. You could try to do the living with water thing up to a point, but at some point, nature wins, and I feel like nature is going to win in the Netherlands too. But they are very, very cognizant of that.
Right. Right. Working with nature as opposed to fighting it,
Yeah.
trying to control it. Yeah. Yeah. It's, and maybe obviously science is really important and doing research like this and putting it out into the public realm, to have discussions, to revisit decisions that were made, like removing the funding for the mid Barataria, I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly, sediment diversion project. You know, if articles like this are an opportunity to push that back into the conversation and consider, you know, reestablishing the funding associated with that, then
Yeah.
maybe that's the purpose of pieces like this.
Yeah. So that project would have restored a more natural flow to the Mississippi Delta, and then the next 50 years it would have created more than 20 square miles of land. The project estimated, including, you know, sediment deposits and things like that. The Republican governor Jeff Landry, who is not on my good list right now for other reasons, decided to scrap that. And so that was $3 billion. It was money that they got from the oil companies because of the BP disaster. But also, I mean, but at the same time, like I look at that, I look at $3 billion and I look at the amount of land that was going to be created, 20 acres, 20 square miles, sorry. And I think about the size of Connecticut and I'm just like, I don't know, is that enough to like help, maybe for the short term? But like, I don't know. I feel like they just need to plot a new town somewhere, maybe. I know that's like, and then give the land to the heirs of the people who are living in New Orleans so that they move there in the future. So that you don't have to leave your place, but then you have this other place you can go to at some point. There's something like that can be worked out, I feel like. And even just like thinking about how to recreate, you know, the Mardi Gras feel, the cultural aspect of it. But it's hard and it's so political and it's so personal and hard.
Well, it would be interesting to go back to the, you know, kind of the, in a sense, the aftermath, the period after Katrina, and I don't know the time span to look at it because like the pandemic, like COVID, that forced COVID was, we talked about work from home for decades.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden a pandemic happened and all of a sudden we're all working from home and it forced a social experiment in a sense that had been discussed for a long time and what the potential benefits and trade-offs. I feel like we focus so much on in the transportation field pushed a lot of the benefits of work from home, didn't always talk about what some of the trade-offs would be. And but can we, so then in the same way, can we go back to the post-Katrina period where it was a period of um, an event that occurred that caused a change and caused this relocation? And uh, what were the lessons learned from that? Is it possible to relocate a body of people? What are the impacts on their lives, where, and their families and the generations that come after? Because now that was 2005. That's over 20 years ago when that occurred.
Yeah.
So what's the,
Somebody should do a longitudinal,
yeah,
some
what's
sort
the
of longitudinal
analysis
study.
on that? Um,
Yeah.
y-
I'd love to hear that when somebody comes up with it. Yeah, so I'm glad I'm not the person who has to decide how to solve it. But I think we can come up with some good ideas. And I think your point about putting it out in the open and having a discussion about it instead of just kind of burying it under the rug is really important too. I think these professors and the researchers really did they're doing New Orleans and the people there a solid by exposing this potential, calamity. And I think that
yeah.
there's
And thanks to
good
the
things that come
Guardian
out
for
of it.
covering research papers like this.
Yeah,
Again, science matters.
I know. And the Guardian, man, they've been killing it. I don't know what it is about that newspaper, but they just every time they always have good urban stories
Hmm.
from around the U.S. and it's amazing. Not just around the world too. I mean, they had a great article about Sydney and its suburban transit network the other day. So cool stuff. All right, shall we move on?
Sure.
Transit food deserts. Americans without cars in transit deserts, including Memphis, Providence, and Duluth, face long bus trips, service cuts, and food insecurity as COVID-era transit funding expires. Advocates and researchers point to taxi vouchers, microtransit, mobile grocery stores, and scooter programs as emerging solutions. This was by Leila Nargi in The Guardian.
Again, the Guardian. Thank
Again,
you,
again,
Guardian.
again, The Guardian. Thank you, Guardian. Always covering some really good stuff. Yeah, so I feel like this one specifically, I've been talking a lot about this lately in the idea of food deserts, and we had Stacy Mitchell on the show, and I've repeated it over and over again from Stacy Mitchell from ISLR, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, talking about like this whole thing about the Robinson-Patman Act and how there weren't food deserts until the 1980s when the Reagan administration decided to stop enforcing Robinson-Patman, which is like anti-competitive actions
Mm.
by stores like Walmart and other big box stores and things like that, where basically there was a food, a good grocery store or at least a quality place where you could get food in most neighborhoods around the United States. And then they disappeared after this, pro business, law wasn't enforced. It's still on the books. It's just not enforced. And so it was really fascinating to read that. And so I think about it from that lens of like the built environment that we've cultivated has created these food deserts and these transit deserts, because if we build around the car, we can't get people to their healthy food
Hmm.
because they don't have the access. And so the article I feel like is really good because it has like a lot of research about this stuff, but it's also frustrating because I feel like I wonder if there's something deeper that's like not addressed that's even further down that we can change, like the Robinson-Patman Act or like enforcement and things like that, where you could go back to a time. I don't know if you could ever go back to times, but like create a future where there's more access to food and less insecurity in the transportation and food space.
It'd be interesting to do like a health impact assessment or do something to map it out, like you've talked about, and how even just hearing about that act. Like it's fascinating to me. I want to go back and listen to that episode that you all where you talked about it, because to see the connections between, we're focused on this this outcome, this experience that's happening to people, and the threads that are associated with um, this, that are impacting the state that they're in. I think the article is important. Like you said, it obviously highlights where is access to not just food, healthy food, what is the transportation system to help people get to those resources that are, and if they don't have access to a vehicle or choose not to have a vehicle, but also the social support infrastructure and the gaps that exist within that as well, in terms of where can a person use their SNAP benefits or their Medicare benefits, and does that also constrain the options that they have available to them? And that's, I mean, again, the multitude of challenges within the systems that are supposed to be helping people and helping us function as a community.
Yeah, you make a good point about the different like necessities that people have to have, or the barriers that we give people because we make it so that only a certain like class of person gets SNAP benefits or food stamps or these types of things, and then we say, oh, you can only use it on this type of food, and you can only do this, and you have so many restrictions, and then you can only use them at these grocery stores, or this farmer's market does it, or
the story about the woman who lives in Providence where Price Right doesn't accept her Medicare U card, but Stop and Shop does. So she has to go to multiple locations, and one is further away or requires a transfer on her bus, and it seems insane.
And on a cold day, that's like the worst thing ever, right? Like,
yeah,
to have to transfer.
I appreciated the article too because it focused more on, these are several cities or more urban and suburban locations that they featured. I've done several projects doing coordinated plans in more rural communities, and this is unfortunately a fairly common challenge there. And people that are falling through the gaps in terms of not having transit access or transportation access, the challenges of providing transit to more rural communities, and in terms of service provision, the cost of service, and then also having access to food. Dollar General is really the most common food store in a lot of rural communities, or a store like that, as opposed to a market or a grocery store with more variety. And so we're often thinking about what are the potential solutions, everything from bringing not only people to food, but bringing food to people. So mobile food banks are exploding all over the place again, and that is out of the necessity of affordability and people's needs, but they are a way to provide healthier food options and bring them to the people within communities. We've talked about Instacart, that's very expensive, and then also just collaboration and coordination within the community to try to have a volunteer network that helps people get to the store once a week to be able to get their groceries. So the article was focused on a different geographic setting than we typically think about this. So I appreciated that.
Yeah. I really liked like them throwing in all the research too, all the professors and the background stuff like that. Like you usually wouldn't get an article that like throws in all these papers and stuff that they put together, which I love, just because we're us, I think. But it also brings a vibrancy to the discussion. The other thing that makes me think about is like transportation insecurity more generally, and the mental health aspect of it. And you have your physical health, and you have, the need for fresh foods and fresh foods. Food insecurity is one thing, but then, we talked to a bunch of folks in the last couple of years about just kind of that transportation insecurity and the negative feelings that it brings to have to ask somebody for a ride, or feeling like you're not able to access a place because you don't have the means, or like it can be embarrassing. It can be dehumanizing. It can be like for a number of different ways. And so it's not just about the food. It's about like the ability to access places where you need to go, whether that's for social reasons, for health reasons, to go to not just the grocery store, but employment, to go to your doctor's appointments. I mean, transportation is such a major part of the way that people access systems that we've set up, that we haven't created a system to access the systems, right? Like we need that system. And it brings me also back to Carol Martin's discussion about like the philosophy of transit justice, right? And transportation justice. And like, if we were thinking about a place in the future where everybody had access to everything, how would we design it? Well, we wouldn't design it so that the rich people had everything that they needed and the poor people didn't. You'd design it so that everybody, because this is one of the things, I think it's Dworkin, and the desert island idea, which is basically like to create equitable outcomes. You basically blindfold somebody and you say, if you're going to go to this desert island, you don't know whether when you get there you're rich or you're poor. How would you design the systems how would you set up the systems to be able to support yourself when you're there equally among everybody? And so it gives you this kind of idea of like, if you don't know, you're going to set up a more equitable system for everybody, right? Because you're not rich, you're not poor. You're just like, oh, well, what if I was rich, or what if I was poor? Right. And so thinking about that from a transportation perspective is really fascinating, and thinking about that in the in the square of insecurity specifically is like we haven't done the right things to actually get us to that place, because we're already starting off in the wrong places. So that's kind of my thinking about that. Should we move on to the next one?
Sure. I'm going to sit with that.
Have you read Carol Martin's book?
No,
Transport Justice.
No.
We talked about it on the show. I talked about it with Carol. Carol's been on a couple times, and I think when I had him on it, I gave him a hard time, and I might have yelled at him actually, because there's one chapter in the book where it's a philosophy book, right? So like the philosophy is it's a different game than I'm used to playing. And so he writes a whole chapter about this one theory that could be used, but then in the end he's like, this is probably not sufficient for this. And I was like, you made me read this whole chapter to say of this really deep, hard thing, to say that it didn't really matter. I remember that very deeply. I was like,
what was his response? Like, why did he feel that needed a place in the book?
Well, because I think he was trying to go through all of the things that you could think of, right? Like, so he's trying to lay out all the possibilities. And so he was saying like, that's one of the possible ways that you could think about it, but it's not really for transport. It's not for philosophy generally. Maybe it was a way to think of things, but not for transportation. So if you're trying to think about equitable transportation system, this one thing, I think it was chapter 5, but whatever, chapter 5, the thing we went through on chapter 5, that thing didn't matter. And I was like, I don't know. I had to go back and listen to see what he actually said in response, but I was like, come on, man, you made me read that whole chapter for nothing. It's already a hard enough book as it is. A very good book, I must say, and folks should read it. But at the same time, like, it is a philosophy book, and it is pretty intense and dense. All right.
I'm gonna have to put it in the show notes, and it's already in your books, over 100 books in Bookshop.
It is.
Right?
It is in the books. Yeah, it is in the books. And the episode is definitely a really good listen as well. I had multiple people come up and say that was an excellent episode. So folks should, and I've posted it as a replay on Christmas a couple times, I think. So it's out there. Okay. We can plan for a lower cost of living. Even though the United States has a high GDP, it lacks the ability to provide many with health and happiness. Many families feel stressed because their incomes aren't enough to keep up with expenses, which leads to more work and less happiness. Todd Littman believes that because of policies which increase housing and transportation costs at the expense of alternatives, that reduce costs and stress. This is Todd Littman in Planetizen. What did you think about this one?
I don't know. Littman's articles are always it wasn't
Todd.
Anything outstanding. I mean, it was like I sure, I agreed with everything he said, or most everything he said, but it wasn't anything earth-shattering. I think it was all fairly straightforward and obvious. So sorry for the truth there.
Well, here's how I thought it was helpful.
Okay.
Here's how I thought it was helpful. And I agree. Todd writes a lot of articles, and they usually show up on Planetizen or vtpi.org. And he does a lot of compiling of things, much like I do. But here's what I think was really interesting. And I think right now we're having a discussion in the United States about affordability. And I think tying the planning process or planners in general to this discussion about affordability is important, because I don't know about how many people, and planners do, but I don't know how many people outside the planning profession understand like how much their affordability is tied to the things that are in their built environment. So where you live makes you drive further, raises your insurance rates. Those types of things I feel like come in and don't make a lot of sense unless you kind of like spell them out. And so
I don't disagree with that, but I don't think I wouldn't give this article to someone to try to convince them of that argument. One, I think it goes back to like that conversation we were just having about getting, New Orleans is going to be underwater in a few decades. How do we get people to consider that and move? They're they're in their reality, they're in their place, they're in their home. They've made decisions based on um, the 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 factors that are in front of them at that point in time. So I I think we have to there's a nuance, and I don't think that we're great at it as planners to present people with these economic arguments regarding, in theory, if they have the privilege of the choice that they make, then maybe they don't have a choice in terms of where they live. Or again, we were just talking about transit deserts and food deserts and the constraint that a person may have because they've made a decision regarding the affordability of a home and putting a roof over their heads and their families' heads. And and yes, they may be separated from the other costs that are associated with that decision. So I think I guess overall, again, I think he's laid out the argument, but I it's written in a very it's not as simple as he's laid it out.
how would you change the language of planners to be more, or the language of advocates to be more responsive to the real life kind of situations that I feel like we've put them in because we force people to live in these places far away from things, or made force them to make these choices. But how would you change the language to kind of maybe make it more understandable or connected to their situations? I'm not sure how.
I think we all first have to identify um, kind of the likely privileged perspective in which we even begin our arguments or begin our statements. Uh, yeah, I think that to try to step out of that bias is can be difficult. And it's probably an overused phrase now at this point, but to try to meet people where they are, to understand. Um, Several years ago when we were doing these episodes during the pandemic, I remember we were having a conversation about a Streets blog article that was going through a period. It was, I can't remember the article. I mean, it was just one of many Streets blog articles that we read and talked about, but it was almost chastising people for the choice of having a motor vehicle. And I was like, that's bullshit. not everybody has the privilege of living in a walkable neighborhood or um, needs a vehicle to get their child to daycare to then get them to work. Or, it was just such a um, tone deaf position to take and to present. And and so I think again that's that part of we gotta I don't know. We need to be conscious. I haven't answered your question necessarily, but I've just gone off on a
no,
little rant.
no, but I appreciate that. I appreciate that because I feel like this show has been accused of being a little bit off
Pollyanna?
Pollyanna, but also like privileged, right? Like where we talk about things that I live in San Francisco in a neighborhood that I can walk everywhere, etc. I don't own a car for that reason, and I'm not forced to own a car. I also want to acknowledge that, like, in some ways, there's talking to like the individuals who are, making these choices, and then there's like talking to policy people, and then there's talking to who are making these changes to the higher level policy, and so then there's also presenting an argument away from a status quo that we are stuck in, right? And so I find that frustrating too. Is like I'm not the biggest car hater in the world. Like I got a car keys when I was 16 and needed it to drive around Texas. I did have bike trails and stuff where I could go around my neighborhood, but also if you wanted to go to a movie or whatever, you had to, or to go to the grocery store, you had to get out of the neighborhood, you had to drive a car. And so I appreciate that I lived in that situation before I lived here, and so I understand maybe a little bit more than some of the folks that maybe grow up in a place where they never had to drive a car on a coast somewhere. And so there is also like the need to push, I feel like, folks to think a little bit differently about how this could look in the future than the situation we are now. Because for me, I feel like a lot of the built environment decisions that we've made over the last 100 years have led to a lot of the problems where people are forced to make these impossible choices, unaffordable choices. The insurance rates were one of the main reasons. Insurance and car driving rates were one of the main reasons why inflation was so bad, because that was part of the index, and that was part of the index that was rising the most. I don't know if you remember, but like buying a used car for a time during the pandemic, I feel like it was like the same as buying a new car. Because the way that we had limited supply and people were dependent on it and needed to get new ones. So I'm kind of rambling here as well, but I do think I take your point, but I also feel like we need to push sometimes to get people to think a little bit differently about how the built environment overall impacts their health, their happiness, the way that they live their lives, and I don't want to tell people how to live.
You're preaching to the choir. I taught classes on this topic, so I don't disagree. I think we have to continually challenge ourselves as to how we can move those discussion forwards, and given what the audience that needs that we're hoping is receptive to it, or we want to make them receptive to it. And again, going back to the article that we were just talking about, also recognizing not just the built environment, or what else has helped to shape the built environment. You were talking about the act that constrained competition and limited the types of food markets that were available within communities. So it's, that's policy impacting the built environment. How far do we have to untangle that web?
Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so deep. That's the problem, is it's so deep that it's hard to get ourselves out of it, which is why I think we're trying to do electric cars and robo-taxis and all these other stuff, because it's like continuation of the system that we already have, that we built up so many layers over time that it's hard to peel them away. It's like painting a house 10 times, and then to get to the bottom layer, you have to peel away the 9 layers, but that's a lot of work in itself. And so, to get there eventually. Shall we go to the next one?
Sure.
Weekend transit service impacting weekday ridership. Mark Brown argues that bad weekend transit schedules are reducing ridership during the week as more people will drive when they don't have access to destinations 7 days a week. Transit systems often make the choice to reduce headways because there's lower ridership on weekends, but that also could lead to people to stop taking transit altogether or possibly even buy another car, diminishing potential ridership even more. This is by Mark Brown in Car Free America. It is a subscriber post on Substack, so I did not have access to it. I believe you did not have access to it.
No.
But the general idea I thought was fascinating, that you're limiting your weekday ridership by limiting your weekend headways.
I thought it was, again, great. I thought it was an effective way to talk about travel behavior, and the things that can impact a person's travel choices. So yeah, I thought it was good, and I hadn't thought about it from the standpoint of the impact of reduction in weekend service and the decisions that it could have on the choices I make throughout the week, particularly if it is a change I'm not used to. Like if I move to a community and that's the status quo, when I move in, then it's maybe something I adapt to. But to have something taken away and I have to modify my behavior, then you just, as he said, the risk is that then you think about all the other trips that you're taking on other days of the week.
I feel like it's a continuum of just like frequency generally. When you have frequencies that are closer together, headways that are closer together, 10-minute headways, 15-minute headways, you're more likely to take that train or bus to work because you know that you can get back at any time during the day, versus like a commuter rail line or something along those lines that comes every hour or every hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it is. Like you're like, well, I could get on this one, but then if I had to get back in an emergency, if my kid was sick at school or whatever else, like maybe I shouldn't take it because I don't know. I'm not certain about when it's coming and when it's going.
So your transit agency needs a guaranteed ride home program.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I feel like this is a continuation of that idea, which is like, if you're going to get rid of your car and be able to take transit during the week, then you should have a guaranteed ride somewhere on the weekends as well, right? So I feel like this is just kind of like the weekday or week kind of encompassed week that's kind of mirroring the encompassed day of somebody's like work trip altogether. And I'm personally frustrated by Sunday schedules. I mean, like BART is every like 20 minutes, which is not bad, but it's also like, you got to schedule around it. I have a phone app and I can tell when it comes and I can wait at my house or whatever, which is fine. But it's kind of nice to just know that there's a train coming every 5 to 10 minutes. Muni is the same way in some instances. A lot of times, though, Muni is actually pretty good, so I don't have to worry about it too much. But on the 24 and the 48, it's a lot less on the weekends, so it's harder to get to like the beach or something if you want to go on a Sunday and come back. So, just like little things like that.
Yeah, it makes me think of two things. Both this article and the transit food desert article made me think about, again, the importance of communication and accurate real-time information. You mentioned, a transit app or the transit app and the ability of...
They were really smart calling it transit app, weren't they?
But they were. It's like Q-tip. Or no, actually, it's different than Q-tip.
Kleenex, right?
Yeah. The confidence, we have in the general accuracy of that real-time information that's being fed into that app is worth a lot. Right?
It is
in
worth a lot.
In terms of our time and, like you said, the confidence of knowing that the bus or the train that you're waiting for is going to be there. And if it's not going to be there, that gap too, so you can plan for that. And now I have to remember the other thing that it made me think of, and now I completely forgot it.
Well,
oh my gosh.
On that point, while you're thinking about that, on that point, like, I mean, I wrote something about this as well, which is like, it's frustrating in a way. Real-time information is great and for what it is and what it does, and I've loved it ever since it's come out with the Munibus apps that have come, one of the first ones, but it also requires you to have a phone, And so
True.
you're tethered to this technology, and you're forced to have this thing that costs you something every month. It's not, you can get cheap ones and it's not super expensive in some ways,
Right.
but it's also still an expense. And it's kind of like, I wrote about this. It's like kind of like requiring a vehicle to participate in society, requiring you to have a phone to participate in society, to participate in the bus
I think
system.
about that with QR codes on restaurant tables to get the menu.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
like,
Just so annoying.
come on. Just give me the menu.
Yeah, just give me a paper menu. I just want to see it in front of
Yes.
me, right?
Yes.
But like you're requiring people to have this thing, this expensive thing in many cases, to participate. So I feel like because government is required to serve everybody, there should be a way to serve everybody. And the way to do that with transit is just to have frequent service. Then you don't need a phone.
So I just remember the other thing I was thinking about. It's also interesting because is this an artifact of this idea that we work a 9 to 5, or we're planning for a weekday work trip commuter that is working, like I said, a 9 to 5 schedule, and so. But that's not the reality.
It doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah, in so many ways. And so it's inequitable. And I mean, it would be interesting. I don't work on the transit side of the Nelson Nygaard house. So I'm sure many of my colleagues have the data in cities across the country to look at the distribution of trips missed or not taken because of weekend service not being available.
But you're making such a good point, because and it ties to what I was saying about this weekday is the same thing as the week as a whole is the same as the weekday.
Yeah.
In that, because of the way that the work schedules are now for white collar workers, right? We're not including like a bunch of folks who never got to work from home and have really hard jobs, the service workers and the essential workers and people like that. But for white collar workers or folks that work in offices or people that can work from home, especially here in the Bay Area, it's a lot of folks. They're only coming into the office like 3 times a week. And the companies are now pushing them to come back for 4. They push them for 3, then they're pushed for 4. I feel like eventually they'll push them for 5. But at the moment, they're only coming in 3 times a week. The same people are taking transit. Bart said the same people are taking transit. They're just not taking as many trips. And so if you are having those low Sunday trip, those low frequencies on Sundays, you're even more impacting it now, because these people are not coming in those other 2 days now. So their decisions to drive are even even more impacted. And so you're actually maybe even limiting more than Mark thought, because of the way that work from home works now for a lot of these companies, the white collar companies. And I never want to say that we should orient transit, and we did for a long time. We oriented around the commute, which is oriented around white collar workers. But this is actually a way to get us out of that system, to actually make it a 7-day system that is actually something for people who need it. And frankly, like Anna Zivart says, like the 30% of people that don't drive. So you're making great points, Tracy. I love it.
Both of us in our foggy allergy adult brains.
Yeah, our tree pollen impacted brains.
This is what we love. This is why, I'm going to get back on a regular schedule of Mondays, because these great conversations.
I love it. I love it too. Okay, last one. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Once in a while, every once in a while, once a year in Cumberland, Maine, the streets are closed for migration of amphibians. The migration has changed the way the city looks at infrastructure maintenance and road design, and shows us how we've impacted natural systems cut off by roads and settlement. This was in Grist. This reminds me of the book Crossings by Ben Goldfarb. We had him on the show a while ago. But he talks in the book about, there's a number of, and I think he might talk about a place around here, but where they close off the roads for a night so that the amphibians can cross the road, and so they don't get smooshed by cars, because it really impacts their populations, which impacts the ecosystems. And it was a really fantastic book looking at all that stuff. And I just really love this article. I like this idea of ecosystem services or ecosystem saving things, because we've just, paved over a lot of it.
Yeah. I'm really happy that we're ending on this article. I also thought it was great. Environmental transportation infrastructure is really important. And I also appreciated that they talked about the observations that they made and ways to modify existing systems or small changes they can make that could achieve the same goal at a lesser cost. And like this article talks about, in this case, they're talking about a finite period of time, once a year, or a certain time of the year where this is happening. So it is also, well, in theory, something that could be planned for to reduce the impact on amphibious wildlife. Though the article talked about the challenges of a changing climate, and that it increases the unpredictability of when that event may happen. But living to change creatures, living in Flagstaff right now, we're, this spring, we're in the migratory pattern of the elk. The elk are coming from lower down in the like Oak Creek Canyon and Sedona area, and they're migrating back up into Flagstaff, the higher elevations. And some of that migration happens along I-17, the interstate corridor. And so they're in the process of putting in a wildlife crossing area. It's been under construction for a bit because there's so many collisions. In the article, obviously, whether it's elk or moose or a larger animal, those collisions are more obvious than if it's an amphibian. But the amphibian is just as important. But this planning, again, like we talked about, whether it's people that we've constrained their behavior by the way we've built the environment. The same goes for our animals, and we expect them to cross between a sign, elk crossing here. It doesn't work that way.
No, they do not read English or any other language.
Yeah.
No, that was the great part of Ben's book, was that he talked about, a lot of the elk crossings in the migratory systems. And what I also found fascinating, not necessarily in this article, but just kind of the discussion more generally, is like we've kind of cut off a lot of these migration paths that have been existing for millennia.
Well, there's a huge concern about the wall along the border and what's being done and the impact that it's going to have on wildlife.
Yeah.
And
because they don't know borders, like they know, like, ecosystems, not like international borders set up by humans. Which is super frustrating. I've been watching, like, this is kind of super wonky, but I've been watching a lot of like nature stuff on YouTube, and ecosystem restoration stuff. So I watched one recently about, like, there was somewhere in Utah, there was a river that had gone dry, and it basically only showed up like when there was a big rainstorm, and it was just basically flushed through. It was like a wadi or something. And, basically they restored it to the point where beavers came back to it. And then the beavers restored it like completely to this really lush landscape. Oh, there's like 5 beavers. And it was like this amazing restoration of what it was before, human settlement came and killed all the beavers, because that was one of the big trading things when people came to North America from Europe, was like basically beaver pelts. That was like the trading companies would search for that. That's why like cities like Detroit were set up. And then there was another one about China where they reintroduced like 10 horses back into this desert landscape. And because they're so heavy, they're like 800 pounds each, they actually like stamp into the land. And so just their migration patterns around this like desert allowed it to become grassland again, even though the whole area was, desertification. It was just this one apex animal that came back. And it's the same with the beaver. It's the same with these horses. It's the same with reintroducing the wolves into Yellowstone, right? They that the trees are coming back now and everything because of that. You need this apex animal. It doesn't have to be a predator, but it can be like an apex animal that like actually change the system. And then for the horse one that was fascinating was like they were redistributing seeds. So there's seeds that like because of their dung, right? So they're eating grass in one place, and then they moved to this other place, and they'd poo, and then it brought when their hoofs stamped in, the water would catch, and then the seeds would catch, and then it would grow all this grass on this desert landscape. And so it just makes me think of like all the ecosystems that humans have like thought were, the Scottish Highlands. Like the Scottish Highlands have been oversheeped, and they were actually forests before it was all cut down, a long time ago. And so I've just been watching all these episodes on this stuff, and it's like fascinating, like how they actually are bringing them back because they're finding out what the one little key that they can turn to fix it. And it reminds me of like the built environment more generally. Like there's got to be like we've monocultured ourselves into this like car oriented society. And so like, is there a way that we can get back to this system that was pre-car? The cars are necessary, like you said earlier, like they're necessary because of the way we built our built environment. They also allow people to go further distances. They're a modern marvel, but they don't belong in the center of a city because of their geometry. And so is there one way that we can like reorient so that it's more sustainable and the ecosystem works better than just this like monoculture? And so that's kind of like where my brain's been going when I watch these nature shows where they're restoring habitat through the introduction
I love
of
that.
beavers
I love
and
that.
horses.
Now I'm going to have this idea like, okay, what is the horse? What is where that we're putting down the foot and what is it? I like that.
I'm gonna put these episodes in the show notes too, because I feel
know
like
you should. That's what I was gonna say.
They're like these 30-minute things about. It's fascinating.
Is there one on the Klamath River and how that's?
I bet you there is. I bet you somebody did it.
And I mean, nature is so responsive. How quickly the salmon have been coming back. Yeah.
And the other fascinating thing was like these horses. The Chinese government, like there were only like 10 of them left or something, like in captivity, because they've been wiped out since like the 60s on the landscape, but they had been captured. A lot of them had been captured and put in zoos. So there's like a couple in the Munich Zoo, and there was like a couple in like the Dutch Zoo, and like they were like all over the world. And so they purchased them and brought them back. And then the process of their genes like telling them like how to live in the wild again. Wow. They had to like reacclimate them slowly, right? So they put them in this one area first. They did a second step later, and then they released them into the wild, right? So it wasn't just like they took these horses from the zoo and released them, but they like reacclimated them. And then the next generation of horse was displaying all of these different like characteristics from that probably existed before they were domesticated or before they were put in the zoos that they didn't see before. So the DNA because that's where they came from, the DNA from that living area was so strong. One of the horses found a water hole that like the scientists didn't even know existed.
Wow.
And so like, just like how amazing nature is like amazing, right? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. It makes me, I need to go back and look. There was an article in the AZ Central Arizona Republic a few weeks ago on the wild horses in Arizona. And so now I want to go back and look and see if there was any bit of this thread in there and telling their story.
I bet.
Yeah.
Oh, I talked with a friend this weekend about like the crazy history of horses and like the steppes and stuff, and how DNA testing found that like they were the ones that brought people back after the plagues in Europe and helped repopulate the area.
Oh,
and so the DNA mixes of people is different because of that. And it's just like so much cool science out there.
Wow.
Very cool stuff. Science. That's our secret message for today is science.
Science.
This week and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome and keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Heavyweights really wouldn't be here without us. Thank you very much. Support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. $2 a month will get some stickers and a handwritten note. $10 a month will get you a Bust only scarf. Again, $1 will get you the show without ads. And also, I appreciate those who have supported at the $10 or more level. I'm going to read their names because I've been doing that lately, and I really appreciate them. Andrew, Ben, Derek, Gabrielle, Glenn, Greg, James, Jeremy, Jim, Joseph, Catherine, Mal, Marcus, Matthew, Mike, Nicholas, Abraham, Oliver, Steve, Abby, Ed, Matthew, Sylvia, and recently added Andrew A. We called this the Dallas tier for a really long time, and I set these tiers up on Patreon like back when I started this in 2014. So they're about 12 years old, and so I probably should evolve them. Like, you know, like nature evolves, we should evolve them to different maybe steps or something like that. I don't know, but I appreciate everybody who's supporter in any way you support, whether you listen to the show just by listening or you know, you go into the bookshop site or whatever. So thanks everybody for coming along with us. Listen to our questions and comments. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to tweet us or comment on any of the social sites where the podcast appears. Feel free to email us at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. By the way, I want to thank folks who send in notes, even if they are off the record. I won't read them aloud, but I do appreciate the insights. A lot of folks have done that lately. I also appreciate pithy jokes. On our discussion about advertising on last Monday's show, Mike Christensen wrote in, "Dang it, Jeff, there was a car ad in your last episode, and now I own a car," which I know is not true. I was discussing like the ads that show up at the beginning and the end, and I was apologizing for all the car ads that were likely to be there, and because I know people that listen to the show don't like the car ads, but at the same time, I don't think you're really going to be influenced by the car ads at the beginning or the end of the show, so I'm not too worried about it.
Serving the purpose of, you know, doing the advertising that you need to do.
Right. And then Jordan M. wrote about how in the recent Star Wars cartoon Maul Shadow Lord, there was actually a transit map, probably the first scene in the Star Wars universe, a transit map. There have been like trains and things like that in the Star Wars universe, in the cartoons. I think in Rogue One, they used a train station to do one of their shoots. But this is the first time they actually showed a transit map on the show. So it's pretty cool to see that as well. If you have any questions, shoot them over at theoverheadwire.com. If you have any questions for Tracy, I'll send them her way, and then we can answer them on the next show.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Are you going to ask me puppies and butterflies?
I am. Puppies and Butterflies is part of the show where we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe it just didn't fit in the other sections. What is your Puppies and Butterflies for this week, Tracy?
Ride the D.
Yeah.
I can't wait to go to LA and ride the new subway
ride the new subway. Yeah. The Guardian was really, really got deep into the innuendo on that one. I feel like a lot of people like the t-shirt and everything. People are buying the Ride the D t-shirt. The transit agency has got in on it. I was just like, okay, that's great. Go for it. But yeah, that's awesome. I'm really excited. I saw a picture the other day, and the Peterson Auto Museum is on one of the stops. And so it's fascinating to see some of the folks talking about like the juxtaposition of a subway stop next to a car museum as well, which is fascinating. It is a multi-layered car museum. It's like 5 stories. So it's not like it's a 1-story place, but it's really fascinating to think about. Yeah. And also back in 2007 on the blog, I posted this on my Blue Sky, but I drew a little picture of a subway underneath a bunch of land and then some palm trees at the end. And I said, support the subway to the sea. So we're getting there. So for me on Puppies and Butterflies, I watched the last season of Maul Shadow Lord. I saw that subway map that Jordan sent in. That was pretty cool. And it's just been kind of watching a lot of those crazy YouTube videos and things like that. The weird ecological restoration, and I don't know what started it. I think you know what? I know what started it. I love the idea of redwood trees, and there's one in my like a couple yards over from me. They cut one down, and I complained about it on the show endlessly, so you all know that. But I was fascinated to watch this episode about the redwood trees and how they, obviously like throughout history of the earth, like dinosaurs and all that stuff, going back to the Cretaceous, the Jurassic, all the periods, there were redwood trees. Like there were trees that were similar to that tree. And so it's a tree with a lot of history. And so I was interested in this one episode, the science episode of some sort, where they're talking about the trees. And they were saying like how the redwood tree evolved and how most of the northern hemisphere was covered by redwood trees, but now the climate doesn't permit it. And so the only place it can be is in the, Sequoia region of California, but also on the coastal, where the coastal redwoods are, because of the it's adapted to suck water out of the air, out of the mist, out of the fog. And so the only place really that has that ecosystem in the northern hemisphere anymore is California. And so I was fascinated by that. And then they go through this whole thing where they thought it was extinct throughout the northern hemisphere, but then they found there's actually some living redwood trees in China as well, that they found that aren't the same as the redwoods in California, but they're a different species of redwood that actually has adapted to live where it is. And so I was fascinated by the adaptation. And so this led to all these, the algorithm was like,
click the other.
Yeah. This algorithm gave it to me. And so I watched that probably like a month ago now, maybe. And so now, but now all the other nature shows are coming my way. So that's at Puppies and Butterfly, learning that there's a species of redwood that still exists in China somewhere that is connected to that period of time.
That's awesome. Yeah, you definitely need to share those because I need to change my YouTube feed from knitting videos to something else.
Oh, it gets ridiculous what it feeds you. My daughter is watching all kinds of, stuff about marbles and, the marble chutes that you can build and like train things you can build. And like she watches Katie's Classroom and was watching Miss Rachel for a while. So I'm lucky this is all on my wife's account. So I mess my own account up, and then her account gets messed up by Cora. So that's how it goes, I guess.
It's funny.
Yeah. All right, Tracy, where can folks find you if you wish to be found?
I can be found on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I remember you were on Twitter for so long, and you just didn't migrate over to any of the others, huh?
I haven't. I think it was a good opportunity to think about how much time I was spending on
You're so smart.
social media. I think it was also when I was commuting into San Francisco for work, particularly on the days that I took the bus and not the bike, I would do a lot of reading and tweeting and things like that while I was on the bus. And then the work from home, I'm like, oh yeah, I should
get away from
probably
screens.
not be staring at this all the time, and it got frustrating. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I wish I could get away. I feel like I just can't for work reasons, but I've been trying more often to not look at stuff, but it's hard.
Yeah, I like LinkedIn. I like being connected with the professional community there.
Yeah.
So
and that's what we're talking about.
That's where you can find my peeps.
You can find me on all these social networks: Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Instagram, sometimes Threads, Substack, YouTube, and of course on my website and in your inbox every morning if you sign up for the Overhead Wire daily. And on Flickr, we are Transit Nerds. Everything else is at the Overhead Wire. You can also find my writing on the Overhead Wire blog on my site, and it's cross-posted to the free version of Patreon. So if you want to do the free version of Patreon, you'll also get some of my newsletter intros as well. Thanks for joining us at Mondays at the Overhead Wire. Thanks to our generous patrons for sponsoring this week's podcast. Thank you, Tracy, for coming on the show this
Jeff.
week.
It was great seeing you, and
see you too.
Let's find a date in June for everyone.
We'll get the next one going up soon.
Okay,
and we'll see everybody else next time.
Talking